New Orleans Saints quarterback Spencer Rattler needs to make the most out of his next couple of weeks in order to maintain the Saints starting job. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, usually we do Film Watch Wednesday, but after watching the tape, I decided that it was simply time to tell the truth about some of the biggest names around the New Orleans Saints. Kellen Moore's growth is evident and obvious. Chris Olave has to start making wide receiver one plays, and the clock for Spencer Rattler is ticking. We got all that coming up for you on today's show. We appreciate you very much, whether it's your first time or your next time, being here with us this time, making us your first listen, and being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your first $5 bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. You can head over to FanDuel.com today to get started. New Orleans Saints quarterback Spencer Rattler earned his opportunity to be the Saints QB1 to start the season, but these next 2 weeks might be the fastest that the clock will tick around his opportunity to hold on to that starting role. He's got 2 winnable games on the way up against the New York Giants as well as the New England Patriots. And if he can't win, or if the Saints don't get a win in either of those 2 games, I think the Saints might start to take a look at Tyler Shough. Now, this isn't something that should be massively surprising. There were a couple of things that kind of signal this as it is. First of which was the quarterback battle as a whole. As we've said over and over again from the very beginning of the season, that the quarterback battle over the course of the offseason was for the right to be the week 1 quarterback and for the right to hold on to that spot for as long as you can. It was not ever going to be a, here's all 17 games being handed to that quarterback. They would have to earn the next game, the next game, the next game. The other thing is that you have a trade deadline that's coming up. I don't think either of these quarterbacks will be a part of trade conversations, but chemistry with these quarterbacks might end up impacting some of those trade conversations. For more on that, over at New Orleans Football, Nick Underhill and I broke that down over on our show when we took a look at a couple of different topics for the tempo there during one of his Nickcasts. So make sure you go and check that out. But for New Orleans, I think that this is a really, really important couple of weeks for Spencer Rattler. Spencer Rattler has not been the reason that the Saints are losing games, hence why he's maintained the starting role, and deservedly so. But he also has yet to be the reason that the Saints have won games. So far, he's 0-10 as a starter. 0-4 is probably the most important metric in that starting off this season. But also, we all thought that they would start 0-4. So that's why I start the clock, really, for these next 2 games. The New York Giants are a beatable team, and they just got even more beatable with the super unfortunate injury to wide receiver Malik Nabers. They turned things over to rookie quarterback Jackson Dart. You now have a game's worth of tape on him, so it's less of that quarterback bump that you're going to get. It's not the same as having 3 games on him, but it is something about having a little bit of that exposure for a defense to be able to prepare for the rookie as opposed to him getting his first start up against New Orleans, which would have been a little bit trickier. This is going to put you in position going up against a bad football team to be able to be the better football team, to be able to be the better quarterback out on the field. And Spencer Rattler will need to show that in this matchup. If Spencer Rattler can be the reason that the New Orleans Saints get their first win of the season, then his clock and his opportunity extends immediately. But if not able to come up with a win up against the New York Giants, which is a team conversation, and if not able to come up with a win up against the New England Patriots, also a team conversation, but will reflect on the quarterback, those 2 games, winnable games, are probably going to signal the end or close to the end of Spencer Rattler's initial opportunity to be the starting quarterback here in New Orleans for the 2025 season. That would be a time where I could see the Saints not advocating for it. Whether or not they do it does not matter to me. We'll cover it the same one way or another. But it feels like that is a spot where the Saints could make the decision to make a switch. Tyler Shough has been working very hard in the background. He has been running the scout team. He's been doing a lot of good things. I've heard a lot of great things about him in the building. The Saints are feeling like he's ready, but Spencer Rattler's not given them any reasons to run away screaming from him at all. He's not even been close. Now, there are some things that Spencer Rattler, of course, has to be able to show that he can clean up. Hitting those in-breaking routes, and in particular, hitting those open touchdowns in the end zone, those are big things, right? Like, I'm not going to sit here and go crazy over some incomplete passes that were off target. And I've seen a lot of people overreact to it, but I've also seen a lot of people underreact to it. And so you can't go too far in the other direction either. Those passes don't mean nothing, right? A wide open opportunity to Chris Olave in the end zone up against San Francisco, a crossing route to Chris Olave later in that game, a crossing route, in-breaking route to Rashid Shaheed up against the Buffalo Bills, an in-breaking route that should have been a touchdown to Brandon Cooks against the Buffalo Bills as well, that would have given the team its first lead of the season in that moment. Those were all misses in the connection. And in some cases, you'd like to see the receivers make those catches. However, in other cases, if you're going to be a quarterback one or the top quarterback in the or a top quarterback for an NFL team, you also have to be able to make those throws. Those are throws that you're expected to make. It doesn't matter who you are. Spencer Rattler, Tyler Shuck, Jake Haener, Derek Carr, doesn't matter, right? Like, one of the big things we talked about with Derek Carr was his inability to hit outbreaking routes. He never put the ball where it needed to be there. It was constantly behind the receiver. Now we're seeing this a little bit from Spencer Rattler on in-breaking routes. So it's something he's got to show some growth with. It's not a death knell for his opportunity. It's not something he can't improve upon. It's not something that's past him. There's opportunities to fix all of those things. And so if he's able to do that over the course of the next 2 games and show that he can be a part of the reason why you can win football games, it's going to extend his lifespan as the Saints QB1 for this season. But if he doesn't show that against the Giants, if he doesn't show that against the Patriots, it feels like a time where the New Orleans Saints might hit the eject button there and then put in a different pilot. And with that, that would be Tyler Shuck's first opportunity looking at that Chicago Bears game on the road. Maybe you wait until you're back at home the next week, perhaps, for that matchup. You could go that way too. But in any case, starting Tyler Shuck becomes far more expected and far more plausible if you're not able to win these next 2 games as a team with Spencer Rattler as the quarterback going up against the Giants and the Patriots. And that's not me saying that I don't think that Spencer Rattler can win those games. We've seen Spencer Rattler play 2 of his best games of the season, of his career this season. The game against San Francisco was excellent, both from an efficiency and passing standpoint, as well as finally getting the ball downfield and pushing the ball downfield standpoint, and his ability to utilize his legs. Against Buffalo, I thought he did a very good job utilizing his legs there too. Passed on some vertical opportunities, but used his legs to go and pick those up. So there were some chances there where you could see all of the positivity around Spencer Rattler. So I'm not saying Spencer Rattler hasn't put up good things. He has earned his opportunity to be the starter for 5 straight games to start off this season. But now the criteria and the rubric is going to start getting a little bit more rigid. And the Saints are going to have to start looking at what will win them games, who can win them games, and who's not contributing yet to the winning of those matchups. And if there are changes necessary, which we're already seeing on the defensive side, then that's where you start to make some of those changes. So I could absolutely see the Saints potentially looking to pull the trigger after these 2 games. That's just us telling the truth about where things are with Spencer Rattler. Next, I want to tell the truth about Chris Olave, who's got to start making some catches that you expect to see from a wide receiver 1. Let's get to that next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda is also delivering confidence with every ride, with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else. As of August 2025, from footwork to breathwork, we watch athletes sweat every single detail, and Mazda brings that same level of intention to their vehicles as they craft every model. Everything from the metallic accents to the available Napa leather upholstery, as well as the standard all-wheel drive on all crossover SUVs that make it so that you can drive with confidence through almost any season, and you can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. They just don't make them any better than Mazdas. You can go and check them out today, because just like every other one of your favorite players, they sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, family, the New Orleans Saints quarterback situation is one that's, of course, going to continue to be under the microscope, looking for QB1 franchise quarterback type play. But the Saints wide receiver room is going to start being under a bit of scrutiny as well. And it's time to tell the truth around that New Orleans Saints wide receiver position. And I want to start off with one of the biggest names at the position, with Chris Olave. Look, I've always been pro Olave, as I like to say. I think that he's a remarkably talented wide receiver, world-class speed, great just attitude towards the game, good work ethic, all of these other pieces, and just an overall fantastic wide receiver. Couple of thousand-yard receiving seasons to kick off his career. Had the rough season last year with the head injuries that ended up shortening his season. But outside of that, Chris Olave has been a reliable piece for this New Orleans Saints offense. However, this year, we're seeing a little bit more of the drops than you might expect from the player who is the team's top option, not just at the position of wide receiver, but as a pass catcher as a whole. From the drop on the throw that was in question earlier, which I call a misconnection between Chris Olave and and Spencer Rattler, a pass that Spencer Rattler himself, he said he could have placed better, placed it a little bit too far to the left, trying to throw to that spot before Chris Olave came out of the break. Chris Olave moving through the space maybe a little bit faster than anticipated. However, at the same time, reaching back and catching a pass is something that you expect your top wide receiver to be able to get done as well. And we haven't seen that necessarily from Chris Olave so far this season. A couple of drop passes that we've seen now that maybe kind of raise some eyebrows as well, and some other catches that you just expect your top wideout to be able to make. And so I'm not down on Chris Olave. I think that Chris Olave, as I mentioned, is an immense talent and a very, very talented wide receiver. But if you're going to be the number one wide receiver in an offense, that red zone slant catch for a touchdown that he had against Buffalo, need more of that. That's what you've got to see more of from a guy like Chris Olave. I get the question all the time about whether or not Chris Olave is a viable wide receiver one. And I always push back on the language because it's just the way that I look at the game. I don't do wide receiver one, wide receiver two, wide receiver three, because I think that priority in terms of who is the top option in a game will often change based upon the matchup. Sometimes it's the tight end, sometimes it's the running back, sometimes it's the wideout, sometimes it's the second wideout, all those other pieces. And so I tend to look at things from X, Y, or XZ, and then sometimes F, or depending upon what a team's designation is for a slot receiver. And so I tend to look at things that way. And we know that the Saints don't really have a quintessential X receiver. They have a guy that fits that mold physically in terms of the physical archetype when it comes to Devon Vele, but he's not as involved in the offense as I think he should be so far this season. Now, we know that he's going to continue to ramp up because he was a late addition in late August. And so because of that, he was learning the playbook. He's going to continue to get larger roles. But the Saints decided that they wanted to have Chris Olave throw a pass in the red zone, yards away from the end zone, as opposed to going to that big-bodied wide receiver. If there was a limited role for a guy like Vele to be able to be a part of, maybe that red zone, and especially deep in the red zone, would be the place to utilize that. That's certainly what they did up against San Francisco. And so with all of that considered, though, I struggle to say that Chris Olave is a wide receiver one, because to me, that means X receiver, and he's not the build of an X receiver. Now, you don't have to be 6'3", 215, 220 pounds to be an X receiver. You look at guys like Tyreek Hill, who I know just underwent a horrific injury on Monday Night Football, but he is a bona fide wide receiver one because of his ability to take the top off of a defense. Even a guy like A.J. Brown is 6'1" in the NFL. Now, he's over 220 pounds and a very physical player, and so because of that, you see him go out there and play that X receiver mold extremely well, being the physical box out 50-50 catch, contested catch kind of guy. And Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed have shown major strides in terms of going out there and making contested catches as well. But it's the catches that you don't make that are always going to put you under a microscope. And there have been a couple that have been head scratching when it comes to Chris Olave. So just cleaning it up is all I'm saying. Just cleaning it up so that you're making more of those wide receiver one plays, so that you're making more of those big bodied physical possession, receiver style plays, but then also opening up the offense enough to allow him to be able to go out there and take the top off of the defense as well, which is going to make him more effective in the short and intermediate areas, because you're forcing defenses to respect what he can do with that long speed and that world-class speed that we talked about that he has. That then opens up the game for Rashid Shaheed, who's still averaging under 10 yards per catch, which feels criminal in any offense when you have somebody with that kind of speed on your team. A lot of what we talked about when it came down to the Saints coming into this season was that the Saints didn't have the physical presence at wide receiver, but everything that we were told was that they had the separators, they had the speed, they had the downfield play, and we've not seen any of it through 4 games. Well, that's not true. We've seen a little bit of it through 4 games, but haven't seen anything near what was expected throughout those first 4 games. And so some of it is on the offense and the limitations that the offense has. Some of it is on the shots that the quarterback is willing to take in certain situations and when seeing certain looks, and other things come down also to what the receivers are capable of getting done. And I think that when you have moments to where you have some inexplicable drops and things like that, it can impact confidence. It can impact the defensive confidence as well to match up against you a little bit better because they just don't fear you in that way. And that's kind of what it feels like. Teams don't fear the New Orleans Saints passing attack from 4 different types of defenses. From Arizona, who, does a lot of disguise and plays the game a little bit differently, to San Francisco that plays a little bit more, 2 deep safety shell types of looks, but then also put out there some middle of field close looks. So you had the opportunity to take advantage of that. Saints did a good job of that up against San Francisco. Then you go to Seattle where you got more cover 3 defense. Then you go over to Buffalo where you're playing sort of this strange kind of inconsistent, breakdown of a defense that plays a lot of zone coverage and couldn't really find a lot of creases in those situations. We've seen Chris Olave go out there and find holes in zones from his rookie season. It was one of the first things that we consistently complimented him on in terms of his game. Just want to see more of that when it comes to where he and this New Orleans Saints team are right now. And so I think you got to go out there, you got to start making some of those imposing catches. You got to go out there and start giving him some of the opportunities to make those. And 2 things, going back to the quarterback conversation and the in-breaking routes, but also the wide receiver conversation with the in-breaking routes. Saints have not gotten to run a lot of plays with multiple crossing routes so far this season, which is a bread and butter piece of what it is that Kellen Moore does. And you begin to wonder if some of that is a concern about putting the wide receivers in position to make catches over the middle of the field, and a concern about the passes that are being delivered on those in-breaking routes, and if that's limiting a little bit of what it is that Kellen Moore is comfortable doing with his offense. I'm not blaming anybody for anything, but you start to ask these questions when you go through 4 games and you're not seeing calling card pieces to an offense, and instead you're seeing struggles that almost relate to where some of those calling card things would usually be. So those are a couple of things that you just want to see continue to grow as players get more comfortable, as Chris Olave starts to take more charge, as Spencer Rattler starts being a little bit more risky over the course of the season, and especially knowing probably that these next 2 games are really, really important for him. Him making those throws and Chris Olave making some of those quote-unquote wide receiver 1 catches are absolute musts for this Saints team as they move forward. Coming up next, let's tell the truth about Kellen Moore, who has shown some obvious progress throughout the first 4 games of this season. We'll get to that next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is giving you everything that you need that you want to make sure that you're not missing out on. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. All you got to do is pick a bet, put $5 down. If it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. You can use that on more odds and lines like game spreads, things like that. You can also use it on player props. You can group some of those props together for same game parlays. You can get it on some live betting. Maybe a big time favorite is trailing at halftime and the odds swing in that favor. You know they could potentially pull off the comeback. That's what I love about live betting. And right now, the New Orleans Saints 1.5 point favorites up against New York Giants favorites for the first time this season. The Malik Neighbors impact there is obvious. So make sure you go and check them out. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com and download the FanDuel app today to get started. Once again, that's FanDuel.com and the FanDuel app to get started. Today's episode also brought to you by friends over at Monarch Money. You know, most people can't even name the types of accounts that they have, those financial accounts, and they don't even know sometimes what they are worth. So whether it's 401ks, properties, investments, whatever it might be, sometimes you don't really have the full picture. And so that's where a place like Monarch Money comes in. A one-stop shop for all of your financial information, allows you to be able to manage all of your accounts, even share managing in terms of collaboration as well. They have some collaboration tools that make things super easy. It's allowed me to get rid of like 5 different apps on my phone that I was using to track things like investments and stocks and 401ks, retirement, all that kind of stuff, and put everything all into one app where I can put all those accounts all in one place and get a clear snapshot that's helped me with my financial planning, including budgeting as well, which is my favorite. So don't let this financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com on your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com, promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. We told the truth about a couple of big names for the New Orleans Saints. Now let's tell the truth about their head coach, and that is Kellen Moore, who I think has shown demonstrable, clear, and obvious improvement and growth over the course of the first 4 games of the season. And it's 3 specific things that he has done that I think illustrate all of those improvements. Number 1 for me is the ability to impact his team's behavior, discipline, and effort. Number 2 for me is adjusting when things aren't working, being honest about that and making adjustments. And then number 3 is kind of a 3A, 3B, the ripple effect that point 2 causes in terms of opening up the opportunity for other coaches to make those changes. We certainly saw that over on the defensive side. But then the other piece of it is the verbiage, the language, and just sort of the more commanding tone, not necessarily tone. His tone hasn't really changed. He still has an overall positive and supportive tone, but he's just saying things that let you know, hey, there's no question that he's taking things seriously. So let's go all the way back to point number 1, the ability to impact the behavior, discipline, and effort of his team. Remember, one of the biggest question marks that we asked on this very show when Kellen Moore was even just a candidate was whether or not he had the personality that would command a room. And it seems that he certainly does. Now, he doesn't do it the same way that maybe a Sean Payton does it. He does it by wanting to put his players in position to succeed, by letting them know what the vision for them is and how they're a part of it, right? Letting people have a vision and purpose for themselves and how it is that they contribute to this team and contribute to its offense in particular as well, since he's also the offensive play caller. So I'm going to single that out a little bit. But you look at the discipline of this team, which saw major strides going from week 3 to week 4, let alone week 1 into week 2, and then a step back in week 3, and then being able to rebound that in week 4, which is even more challenging. But to go from double-digit accepted penalties against your team, offense, defense, and special teams in week 3 in Seattle, to no penalties at all on your defense, no procedural or pre-snap penalties on your offense, that to me said something, right? And it's whether it's him in practice, getting on guys that are committing those false starts, procedural penalties, whatever it might be, whether he's empowered other players to do exactly that, then in any case, I see all of that as positives when it comes to the way that Kellen Moore has kind of taken a step forward. And so being able to adequately make those adjustments in the span of a week after taking a major step back in Seattle, I thought was really, really impressive. And that to me has shown growth. Now, he's got to continue that going forward, right? Nothing about what we're saying today in terms of telling the truth about these people is a final thought, right? Spencer Rattler's clock may never run out because he might not turn things around, but he might take another step going up against the Giants, take another step up against the Patriots, right? Nothing is final. Chris Olave might get more opportunities, might start making those bigger plays. All you got to do is give him the opportunity to do it. And so all of these things are a progress check or a heat check a quarter of the way through the season. So now for Kellen Moore's side of this, it's not final, right? You're not going to not be penalized now for the rest of the season. You've got to make sure that you're doing that. And still, some of those penalties even still happened at crucial times, right? The roughing the kicker penalty was a death knell for New Orleans in that game. It was the turning point to me, outside of maybe the touchdown getting overturned to Brandon Cooks. Adjusting, this was number 2, adjusting away from what doesn't work. We watched the Saints get away from the run game too early against Arizona. They came back the next week against San Francisco, remained committed to the run game late while they still had that game within reach. I asked Kellen Moore about it after that game, and he said that that was a personal reflection moment, that he saw that he got away from the run game too early up against Arizona and made sure that he was there. Then they go to Seattle. They deal with some issues with communication at the line of scrimmage, pre-snap penalties, all those other things. What do? They take over a quarter of their offense and put it under center. That way they can use a verbal cadence and have communication at the line of scrimmage instead of relying solely on shotgun silent counts at the line. And so I think just seeing those kinds of adjustments to say, hey, this isn't working, let's do this instead, is a really positive thing, because we watched a more stubborn New Orleans Saints coaching staff in the past not make those kinds of adjustments. And so now all of a sudden there's a coach in the building that's making those adjustments, that's willing to look back, tell the truth, and be honest and say, you know what, that didn't work. I'm going to do this instead. Not, you know what, that didn't work that time, but I'll bet it'll work the 5th time. I bet it'll work the 7th time. I bet it'll work the 16th time. They're not doing that. And because he's not acting that way, the rest of the coaching staff isn't as well. That's why you saw man coverage tick up on the defensive side. It's why you saw changes on special teams. It's why you saw changes in personnel on defense. Quincy Riley getting the majority of the snaps at outside corner in those nickel sets. That's all a part of the ripple effect of when your head coach says, I'm not always perfect, I'm going to adjust, you should too. That's the ripple effect that has. And then finally, just when it comes down to some of the other things that he's shown, I think it's just the continued adjustments and being able to say the right things, right? Him saying like, I want to find the players that are going to do this. We got to find the players, identify the players that can do what it is that they need to do. And if they can't, we'll go and find them. But at the same time, I have full confidence that our guys can get it done. So it's always leading with that positivity, but letting everybody know like, hey, you're not solidly placed within your positioning here, and changes can be made when there's actually that, let's call it consequence. It tends to make people listen a little bit more, and I think that Kellen Moore has done a good job of that. So overall, I think Kellen Moore has shown some demonstrable improvements. All right, let me know what you think. Who do you want to tell the truth about? We appreciate you very much for being here with us. Tomorrow, Crossover Thursday, Patricia Trainer will be here. Don't forget to catch us on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. We thank you very much for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing, how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust you, that nation, I'll holla at you.